Welcome to Advent of Tessellations 2024. My name is Madonna Yoder, and you're joining hundreds of folders around the world on this 25-day journey into the infinite world of repeating patterns folded from a single sheet of paper. You'll discover many different twists in this challenge, building up to advanced patterns with hybrid hexagon twists. On day 11 of Advent of Tess, we're folding this pattern that I call Nudge, which is kind of the precursor to two really cool patterns that are playing with alternative ways of using symmetry on this hexagon, triangle, rhombus, triangle tiling, where in this pattern, this rhombus, if we were to repeat infinitely, would be acting as a position of twofold rotational symmetry, where we would see the same thing on two sides. But in further expansions of symmetry, the third rhombus that would complete this loop would act as that twofold position, and then further out, the next hexagon out would act in that twofold position. But this video is about folding this particular pattern, and you can see how all three of those patterns that I mentioned repeat in the Advent of Tess ebook at gatheringfolds.com. But today, we're adding in open rhombus twists to the skills that we've already learned in Advent of Tess, and we're going to be using that with closed hexagon in the center, closed triangles on the backside around that hexagon, and then open triangles here on the hexagon side again. So let's go ahead and get started. I've got my 24-fold triangle grid on a hexagon with grid lines parallel to the edges of the paper. You can see the full tutorial of that in the welcome video if you've signed up for email reminders. And you can also see the crease pattern for the particular piece of pattern that we're folding today when you've signed up for those. And if you haven't already signed up, then the link for that will be in the description below the video. So for that closed hexagon twist, we're going to be folding our mountain folds right out to the corner of the paper. And on the right-hand side, our valleys will be one spacing above. Then I'm going to pass that off to my left hand and put it down on the table. The most common mistake I see when people are folding closed hexagon twists for the first time is that they try folding with the paper up in the air the whole time, which lets the folds come out as you're working on other parts of the paper. So I just rotated to the next corner, put in the same exact folds, mountain fold to the corner, valley one spacing above, get that down on the table before passing it to the left hand. And you might notice that in the center here, I'm working to keep a small hexagon outlined in the center. And I can relieve some tension here by lifting the rest of this paper up as I'm putting in my fourth, fifth, and sixth pleats. And we're going to zoom in a bit and let these pleats start laying more and more down on the table. I prefer to stop when I have two grid spacings still lifting off the table. You could continue to go down, but it's going to be less likely that you get your twist all the way around on your first attempt. And then I prefer to bop the top so that these edges aren't folding in on themselves when I'm twisting around. Bop the top, grab around, and I'm doing a slight squeeze with my grab and twisting around. You'll notice it's not always going to look good right away. So I'm lifting up, making sure that my valley folds stayed on grid lines the whole way underneath. And suddenly it starts looking better. I can double check on the back side of the paper that this closed hole is nice and tight, and that tells me that all of my valleys really did stay on the grid lines. And then flip back to use my bone folder to smooth things out And now it looks like a perfect hexagon, like nothing ever happened to it. So when you first do that sharp twist to get your hexagon down and in place, and you lift your fingers and you see something crumply, you didn't do anything wrong. It just needs a little bit of tweaking, and then it'll smooth out again. With this pattern, we're going to flip the paper over, and it doesn't matter how you flip because all 6 of our pleats are exactly identical. So I'll flip over, and I'm going to pick a pleat. I'm working on my right-hand side because I'm right-handed, and I'm going to add closed triangle twists at tube pleat spacing from the center on all 6 of my pleats. Specifically, for tube pleat spacing, I have 1 space between the mountain and the folded valley, or sorry, between the new valley and the folded mountain, and then another space to reach my next mountain fold. This means when I fold those in place, I end up with this tube structure. So the mountain is directly laying beside the existing mountain fold. And these are going to be closed triangle twists. So as I'm opening the pleat coming from the hexagon, I'm opening so far that I can get this new mountain fold coming to the exact same point of intersection as the 2 existing mountain folds. And then I can run that new pleat out to the edge of the paper, and that's going to lay down so that we get this twisting around and then pressing just outside of where the valleys of one direction hit the mountains of the other. We can squash our new closed triangle twist. And I'm going to recommend working around clockwise so that the overlaps that are formed between triangles are easier to open on the opposite side of the paper. This is something I know from experience and experimentation. It's not really a mathematical property of the crease pattern or anything. So working around clockwise, I'm going to be folding the next triangle twist on the bottom pleat of the tube. We want to make sure not to skip pleats because that's going to lead to a real mix of layerings of overlaps when we do go to fold the rhombus twists. And so I'm going to say, okay, this is my reference. I'm going to have my valley 1 spacing out from that folded mountain, my mountain 1 spacing further than that. When I'm folding this valley and mountain, this pleat, I'm letting the pleat from the hexagon open up. So I'm not folding through the pleat from the hexagon. And I am leaving the pleat from the triangle that I'm crossing fully folded so that I can cross it with a new pleat that's also going out to the edge of the paper and squash. So that's my pleat overlap. I can see here that it would be difficult to open from this side, which means that it's going to be easier to open from the other side, and that's how I know that I picked the right direction to go around. And rotating, I'll repeat with my new valley fold, 1 spacing away from the folded mountain, my new mountain fold, 1 spacing away from the valley, and setting up this pleat, setting up the new tube, which is opening the bottom pleat of the old tube, and we're opening that enough that we can have our third grid line, or sorry, our third pleat, third mountain fold of the third pleat, if we're being specific, coming to the same point as the intersection of the mountain folds of the other 2 pleats. And I'll lay that down in a way that lets me twist and squash. And again, this time I'll do it without marking. I'm forming the tube pleat, then erasing the bottom of the prior tube so that I can find the third mountain fold at the same point of intersection. Folding through, this causes a pleat overlap and will squash the new triangle twist. Once more, find the tube pleat, the new tube, which opens the bottom pleat of the old tube, running the third pleat out from my closed triangle twist. I cause a pleat overlap and then I squash and smooth out with the bone folder. So for the sixth pleat, here I also want to put in a compound wrap because my next twist will be on the opposite side. I'm going to have my valley one space out from the folded mountain. We just see that folded mountain for one grid spacing. And my mountain one space further than that. And what's going to happen here is that this new pleat is going to zigzag through on top of this existing pleat. So we're going to pop the valley down and make sure to also lift the mountain up. And then this is the part where it's going to zigzag. It's going to bounce. Really, it's going to mirror. You see we have a 60-degree angle between this valley and this mountain. We want to keep that 60-degree angle on the underside. And then where our new valley hits the existing valley, it's going to bounce off of that as well. And then continue out to the edge. And this is going to be true of both the mountain and valley folds in our compound wrap. So that area can almost lay flat now, but there's some tension in the paper up here. So we need to go ahead and open the bottom plate of this tube so we can find all the plates for our final triangle twist here before this compound wrap area will lay flat. So with that in place, I'll go ahead and squash my new closed triangle twist, my final closed triangle twist, and I'll grab the compound wrap as I flip over. So the rest of these overlaps, other than the compound wrap, are exactly identical, but because I did the compound wrap, I basically shifted some layers from sticking out. So notice how this one is sticking out an extra grid spacing past the end of this tube. And this one's aligned with the tube. So this area has more space than this area or any of the rest of them. I want to work in the area with more space, so that's where I'm going to set up my next folds. I'm going to go ahead and tell you where the anvil is laying on here for this first one, and then we'll work on how to find it without drawing on the next one. We're going to have that anvil sitting here. And by the way, if you haven't watched the video on what twists are used in Advent of Tess, the anvil I'm talking about is the center area that's raised up for the open rhombus twist. And specifically, we're going to have this mountain continuing out, this mountain continuing out. This one we already have continuing over here, and this one we already have continuing back here. And our valley folds are going to be on the outside of these mountain folds relative to the center of the anvil. So when we go to open things up, notice I erased this pleat heading down towards the bottom, and we'll bring up a new one in the same direction on the grid line marked there. This is one grid spacing over from the existing mountain fold, and the valley will be on the outside. Then this top of the anvil, we're going to have our valley coming straight into the closed hole, the mountain fold one spacing out from that, or one spacing over, really. And with all four of these pleats, the two existing pleats and the two new pleats in place, I can go ahead and press from the top, spreading out into the corners to squash this twist. And now that this twist is folded, it opens up a nice big space over here for me to work with the next one. So for this one, I'm going to work more with pleat landmarks. So I'll say, okay, my valley fold is coming straight from that closed triangle hole. My mountain fold is going to be right next to it. So when I open up, I see that this new mountain fold is 2 spaces away from the existing mountain fold. In these open rhombus twists, we have 2 spaces away in one direction and 1 space away in the other direction. With the closed rhombus, we had 1 space on the diagonals and 0 spaces on the through line. So this is just +1 to each of those. And so if I see that these two are 2 spaces apart, then in the other direction, they have to be 1 space apart. So 1 space apart in the same grid direction. And there I have my open rhombus twist that I can then press from the top to squash. I'm doing a little bit of holding those pleats while I'm pressing, but not a ton. This isn't one where you have to really press at the corners. For our next open rhombus, I'm going to show with even less drawing, so I can know that my new mountain valley are in exactly the same place they were the last 2 times, with the valley coming to the closed triangle hole and the mountain 1 spacing further down. And then I can open my overlap and say, okay, these are 2 spaces away. That means this other direction needs to be 1 space away. And squash. And this next one I'm going to do based on not the spacing, but the shape in the middle. So we've got that same pleat that we're setting up. And here I see that I've got these 2 spaces on top, 2 spaces on bottom. I've got an in and an out. So I want to match that in and out on the other side. And what I'm looking for is this anvil shape. So it's got a wide base, a wide top, skinny center. So we've got the in one, out one, 2 on grid lines, in one, out one, 2 on grid lines, outlining this anvil shape that's kind of the characteristic center of an open rhombus twist. And so if you're a person who thinks better with shapes, then using that anvil shape will probably be most helpful. If you're a person who thinks better with numbers, then using the, okay, this is coming right there because I know that from all of the previous repeats. And then these are 2 spaces apart, therefore these have to be 1 space apart. Then that would be the best thing to think about for you. So now we're back at the compound wrap, and we need to find our open rhombus twist. I'll go ahead and show a third way of finding the twist, which is, we saw in the last video, the last tutorial, that if you just pop the compound wrap and keep these mountain folds, that makes a closed rhombus twist. Well, if you take a closed rhombus twist and see the separation between these two directions, or these two pleats in the same grid direction, is this way. We want to make that bigger. We can shift that mountain over, put the valley on the far side. And this one, so the valleys are always on the outside. And we want to move this pleat one more towards the outside of the twist. We're going to shift that over. So with the same two pleats, we could fold either a closed rhombus or an open rhombus. And going between these two sizes is a matter of shifting both of these pleats, one spacing more apart than the closed form. And squash. So there's all kinds of ways of finding the open rhombus twist. And thankfully with this pattern, we don't have any interference between the rhombus twists as we're setting them up. So that is all for today's tutorial. Make sure to post to, if you do choose to post to Instagram or Facebook, tag me at Gathering Folds and use hashtag Advent of Tess or Advent of Tess 24 so that everyone can see what you folded. And yeah, I love seeing what everyone folds. Sorry about touching the mic there. And I'm sure that everyone else who's folding also would love to see how you folded it, what paper you used, if you did any drawing to highlight the shapes, whatever you choose to use it for, wherever you put it in your home. So there's also my Discord server where we have that private space for Advent of Tess participants. And if you want to see those patterns that I mentioned with the further repeats with different symmetries, you can get the Advent of Tess ebook, or I'll also have photos of those on my Instagram and Facebook pages. So that was Nudge. Tomorrow we're going to be folding a pattern that I call Maypole. It's named Maypole because it's basically the same as dancing ribbons, but around an open hole instead of a closed hole. So we still have this triangle, rhombus, triangle set of twists that are together. And for this one, we're kind of completing the series of like hexagon, triangle, rhombus, triangle, which twists are on which sides. Where here we have the hexagon all alone with the triangle and rhombus on the other side. So that's what's coming up tomorrow. I hope you have a great day. Happy folding, and see you in the next one.